Today, you will learn how to checkmate with the knight and bishop against a lone king. While this endgame is exceedingly rare, it helps us to understand how the knight and bishop cooperates in the most effective way. I'm Feedmaster Noam Wittenberg, back with the weekly upload. I stream 4 times a week on Twitch, Tuesday and Thursday, 19 o'clock Central European Time, 11 o'clock Central European Time, Saturday and Sunday. Check it out, links in the description below. I'm going to play out the moves on a board, but first, let us understand the ideas of how we are going to go on about checkmating our opponent's monarch. The conversion of bishop and knight against king I divide in 3 subsequent stages. Firstly, we need to coordinate our forces and get our opponent's king on the rim of the board. The king will run to the corner which has the opposite color as our bishop. For instance, if we have a light squared bishop, he will run into a dark squared corner. This is in fact called the safe corner, as it's not possible to checkmate him here. Does this mean that it's not possible to checkmate with knight and bishop against king? No! We just need to move on to the second stage of conversion, which is to get our opponent's king into the correct corner. This will be a corner which will have the same color as our bishop. For instance, with a light squared bishop, the desired corners are on a8 and h1. However, this will not be very simple, as black would try their hardest to not go into the corner with the same color as our bishop. We need to have concrete knowledge of how to force our opponent to do this. There are 2 main resources we need to know when our opponent's king is on the opposite corner of our bishop. They are the barrier as well as the W maneuver. Let's try and explain the barrier now. One very important factor in understanding how to construct a barrier is color complexes. Both pieces need to be on light squares. You might wonder why. Is it because it's easier for our bishop, which is on a light square, to defend our knight if it is on a light square? Not necessarily, at least this is not of primary importance. The fact of the matter is that when a knight is on a light square, it controls dark squares, right? That's just how a knight works. Have you thought about it before, that when the knight is on a certain square, it controls squares of the opposite color of what it is on? So if it would have been on a dark square, well, it would have controlled light squares in this case. Our bishop, however, is limited to only light squares, so we need our knight to cover the dark squares and the bishop to cover the light squares, so that these 2 minor pieces are cooperating together to cover as many squares as possible. And this will help them form a blockade against our opponent's king. Now, I'll show you a video of how the legendary thug life Alexander Grischuk checkmates Karyakin with a bishop and knight against king very quickly and convincingly. He'll be using the W maneuver, which I will explain to you in a moment. Let's move on to the video. First, he gets his opponent's king out of the light squared corner, since he has a dark squared bishop. He wants Karyakin's king to be on a dark squared corner. And now we see how he's maneuvering his knight. This is called the W maneuver, which I will explain in greater detail in a moment. And as we see, quite convincingly, he's getting his opponent's king to the correct corner. It's fascinating to observe the facial expression he made when he was able to calculate the mate. And there we go, the king would have to go to a1 after bishop c3 would be checkmate, which is why Karyakin throws in the towel. The W maneuver's intent is to locate the black king in the correct corner, to finally be able to deliver checkmate with a bishop and a knight. The knight takes away the dark squares from the king, forcing the monarch to progressively move closer to the desired corner for attack. Now, the final stage, when the king has been located in the corner, is to deliver the checkmate. Very often, a bishop is moved to a final diagonal to truly take away all the opportunities of the black king, when we will finally be able to deliver a checkmate. So we need to be careful not to stalemate your opponent's king and spoil all the hard work. Instead, put your opponent's Zugzwang, so the final moves are with check, as we saw in the example of Grischuk winning knight and bishop against Karyakin. Let us take all we've learned and transform it into concrete moves. So in this position, the first stage of the game for white is to get their pieces a bit more compact. They are very far from each other. As well as try and kick the black king out of the center of the board from where it isn't possible to checkmate the monarch. And slowly but surely, white will be able to make progress, kicking the black king away from the center for starters, and then further back. Now the king can go to g3 in this position, but the king will most likely go to g5 because it's closer to the h8 square, which is on the opposite color as our bishop. So the king heads to the h8 square, and now the first stage has been completed. We've placed black's king in the corner of the board. Now we need to realize how to get the black king out of it. This is a typical maneuver with the knight getting the knight to f7. As we see, it's on a light square, from where it controls the dark square, the h8 square, which would otherwise be unreachable. Bishop g6, king f8, bishop h7, very important move to take away the g8 square from the black king, so it has to run further to our desired corner, namely on a8. And now the W maneuver in action, knight e5. And after king d8, then we go knight c4, king c7, bishop e4, and we've been able to form a blockade for our opponent's king. Black has another option as well, which I'll cover in a moment. Let's finish off this variation. King d8, bishop c6, taking away the d7 and e8 squares from the black king. The king moves, bishop a4, and now our king reduces where black can go. And now eventually we're able to push the black king closer and closer to the desired a8 corner. And now comes the moment to strike. King a7, knight c6 check. It's very important that this move is with check. I'm going to show you why in a moment. King a8 and bishop b7 checkmate. Imagine that the king was on a8 in this position, and that it was white to move here. Then knight c6 would be a major error, which would result in a draw, as it would be stalemate in this case. And instead bishop b7, king a7, knight c6 would be the way to go. So as aforementioned, be careful not to stalemate your opponent's king. And now after king f8, which would seem logical at first, right? Trying to get black's king back into the desired corner, namely on h8, which is the opposite color of our bishop. However, we're not going to be so nice as to allow it. Instead, we execute the W maneuver by going knight d7. Remember what I told you, our knight covers a dark square on f8, and the knight is on a light square itself. It forces the king to go closer to the a8 corner, which is the desired corner for us. King e6, king d6, king c8. If king e8, simply bishop g6 check, and the king has to continue going towards the a8 corner. So king c8, knight c5, continuing the infamous W maneuver. Bishop g6 taking away the e8 square from the king. Bishop f7, knight b7 check, continuing the W maneuver. King c8, king c6, and look at this, the king is already super close to the a8 square. King b6, we continue making progress. And finally, after bishop a6, king a8, bishop b7, we are able to deliver a checkmate on a6 with our knight. Now, you have not only learned how to checkmate with the knight and bishop against the king, but you've also improved your knowledge of how the knight and bishop cooperates in chess to take away as many squares as possible. If you made it this far in the video, don't forget to like it, share it, and perhaps subscribe as well. This would bump up the video in the YouTube algorithm, so more chess players learn how to checkmate with the knight and bishop against a lone king. See you next Tuesday.